All right, welcome back. I hope you're all having a great week. Today we're continuing our BCBA exam review, where we're going through a full BCBA exam question by question and breaking down the questions, how I think you should think about them when you take your actual exam. If you're new to the channel, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. Please like and subscribe. I really appreciate it, and you'll get all the updates when I release new videos. If you're looking for our study materials, please check out bcbastudy.com. We offer a full practice exam, a 5th edition task list study guide, and a combo pack, which includes everything. Our second practice exam will be released next week. If you buy the practice exam now or the combo pack, you will get that second exam for free. You can take those exams as often as you'd like. There is no limit. They are yours to keep. Our study guide covers everything, every task list item from the 5th edition. So please check out all of those materials. If you have any questions, let me know. I'm happy to help. Other than that, keep working hard, keep studying hard. Let's get to our questions. 151. Susan grew up in an abusive household. After many years of fighting, she was finally removed from the home and placed in the foster care system. However, Susan still will wait for permission to eat her dinner because that is what her prior household would have her do. This behavior is what? So, as behavior analysts, we deal with learning histories. A lot of times when we're changing behavior, we need to work on unlearning history, essentially. We need to unlearn that prior reinforcement and punishment history that created these behaviors. As far as Susan's history, she grew up in abusive households, and apparently there was something around dinner time where she would need permission to eat her dinner. And now, even though she's removed from that system and placed in a different home, she still abides by those rules. So if this is a history-based behavior, learning history-based behavior, is that going to be considered respondent, phylogenic, ontogenic, or elicited? Well, this is clearly an operant behavior, right? It's a operant type behavior because there's antecedents and there's consequences, and those prior consequences are maintaining future behavior. So we can eliminate a respondent. If we eliminate respondent, we can eliminate elicited, okay? Remember, respondent and elicited go together. Operant and evoked go together. So if you eliminate elicited, you can eliminate respondent and vice versa. So that leaves us with phylogenic and ontogenic. Phylogenic is biology. It's natural learning, okay? It's what we're born with, it's genetic, okay? It's what's ingrained in us from the start. Our ontogenic learning is our learning history, and that's what we're looking at here. All of Susan's behavior in this question is based on ontogenic or her learning history. So the fact that Susan still waits for permission to eat her dinner is due to ontogenic factors. C. 152, based on the scatter plot, when is the worst time to try and observe possible antecedents and consequences for biting? Scatter plots help us identify trends as far as behavior relative to different times, different places. In this case, we're looking at biting, okay, across time from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. And we want to know when is the worst time to try and observe possible antecedents and consequences. Well, if you're going to look for the worst time, what are you looking for? If X stands for our responses and 0 stands for no responses, we're going to look for the time of days where there's no responses, okay, or little data, right? If there's no responses, we can still get some antecedent and consequence data, right? Because maybe we're doing something to prevent the biting, okay? In this case, if we look at our scatter plot for the worst time to try and observe antecedents and consequences, we can see from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m., there's plenty of data, okay? Plenty of time to see when the biting occurs and doesn't occur. There'll be a lot of times to get antecedents and consequences. This would be a very good time to try and observe those, okay? But we're looking for the worst time, right? So if we move on to 11 to 1, again, same thing. A lot of instances of biting, some instances of no biting. We'll get a good idea of what happens right before and right after. But if we go to 2 p.m. and 3 p.m., there's very little data on biting. Biting rarely occurs. We're not going to get a very good idea of what happens before and after biting, okay? So if we're looking for the worst time to try and observe antecedents and consequences for biting, well, 2 p.m. and 3 p.m., when we're not taking any data or biting is not occurring, is by far going to be the worst time for us to observe that. Scatter plots, very easy to read. If you get a scatter plot question on the exam, take your time, okay? Suss it out, and then pick your best answer and move on, all right? Not difficult to read a scatter plot. Just make sure, okay, you're answering what the question is asking. If the question asks you for the best time to observe some data, that's going to look different than this question, which asks for the worst time, all right? So if you get a graphing question, if you get a scatter plot question, just be sure you're answering what the question is asking, okay? They're not overly complicated, but they're going to try to trip you up, okay, via the question. 153, Gordon Ramsay just went live on TikTok and is criticizing the food dishes that viewers submit to him. As he insults and critiques food dishes, more and more viewers are submitting their own dishes. Gordon Ramsay's insults serve as what? If you've ever seen this, Gordon Ramsay will look at TikTok or Instagram videos and critique the dishes. It's pretty funny and it's pretty insulting. However, the more he insults, the more people submit their dishes, okay? Typically, historically, we think of these natural or these traditional technologies like insults and critiques as punishment. But we know in ABA, we determine something is reinforcing or punishing based on its impact on behavior, right? So in this case, these insults and critiques are doing what? Now, when we get a reinforcement or punishment question, let's just ask ourselves first, is something being added or something being taken away? Are we looking at a positive or a negative? Well, in this case, Gordon Ramsay is adding his insults and critiques. So this is going to be a positive question, okay? Remember, positive, we're adding stimuli, negative, we're taking it away. So we can narrow it down to A and B. Now we ask ourselves, is the behavior increasing or is the behavior decreasing? Well, as he adds his insults, more and more viewers continue to submit their dishes. So that behavior of submitting dishes continues to increase. Therefore, we're dealing with what? We're dealing with positive reinforcement. Gordon Ramsay insults dishes. More people submit their dishes. Gordon Ramsay continues to insult the dishes, and that behavior continues to go up and up and up. Gordon Ramsay's insults serve as positive reinforcement. At this point, when you're preparing for your exam and you're about ready to take your BCBA exam, I think you're going to have positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, positive punishment, negative punishment down, okay? However, remember, on the BCBA exam, they're going to test your full body of knowledge, not just the quote unquote hard stuff, everything, okay? And the basics are arguably more important, okay, than those really complicated technical things. So don't forget about the basics when you're studying, okay? Don't spend all your time on things like conditioned motivating operations and then forget, okay, to maintain that basic knowledge. 154, Chad plays baseball for his local men's league team. Today, in honor of one of the sponsors, the whole team is wearing colored wristbands. Chad does not like to wear the wristband while playing in the game because it is unpleasant to him. The wristband functions as a what? All right, be careful in this question, okay? Kind of a tricky question. Think about your antecedents, your behaviors, and your consequences, okay? In this case, what is our antecedent? Well, the whole team is wearing colored wristbands. The whole team puts wristbands on, okay? Chad, right, does not like to wear the wristband, so he's going to remove the wristband, okay? And as a result, he now does what? He escapes from the wristband. In the future, okay, he's going to continue to avoid wearing that wristband. So when you escape or avoid something, what type of consequences is that? Well, that's negative reinforcement, okay? When you escape an aversive stimuli or avoid an aversive stimuli, you are engaging or you're being negatively reinforced. So what does the wristband function as? Is it a punishing stimuli? Not necessarily, because Chad's behavior in response to having to wear the wristband is to actively avoid or escape the wristband, okay? And in the future, that behavior is going to decrease when he does escape it. So the wristband is not punishing Chad, okay? The escaping or the removing of the wristband is reinforcing Chad's behavior, right? Remember the dead man test. Wearing something is not necessarily a behavior. A dead person can wear something, right? Chad is actively escaping or avoiding the stimuli, which is reinforcing him, okay? So we can eliminate A as a punishing stimuli. However, it is an aversive stimuli. Escape avoidance involves escaping or avoiding aversive stimuli, which again leads to negative reinforcement. So the wristband is really functioning as an aversive stimuli, okay? So B is our answer, of course, but let's read all of our answer choices. Whenever you're studying, make sure you read all of your answer choices and you understand why the wrong ones are wrong. In this case, the wrong ones are very wrong. C, contingent stimuli, okay? That's not something we're considering in this case, okay? And then a restitutional intervention. You know, we have restitutional overcorrection, which is a punishment procedure, which involves restoring an environment to a better state than it was before. Obviously, that is not occurring in this situation. Chad is avoiding this aversive stimuli, which is leading to negative reinforcement, and Chad is going to continue avoiding or escaping the stimuli in the future. Therefore, the wristband functions as an aversive stimuli. 155, Amanda and her friends play a drinking game that involves creating a signal, showing that signal, and then following that signal with another signal. If you flash the wrong signal, you're out of the game until the next round. If this were a timeout procedure, sitting out of the game would be considered what? So remember, we have specific types of timeout procedures. Timeout procedures, of course, is a punishment procedure. In this case, timeout is going to try to decrease the future occurrence of flashing the wrong signal. You flash the wrong signal, you sit out the game, and now you have to watch your friends play. What is that considered? Is that ignoring planned ignoring? No, okay, we're not ignoring necessarily, right? We are just removing, okay, the person and making them watch the rest of the game, okay, contingent on this flashing the wrong signal. B, withdrawal of a positive reinforcer. Did we withdraw any positive reinforcers in this case? No, the person was removed from the game. They sit out and they have to watch the rest of it. So what are they doing? Well, they are observing contingent on flashing the wrong signal. So this is the timeout procedure we are using, okay? Now your punishment is being removed but having to observe your friends play contingent on flashing the wrong signal. So sitting out of the game would be considered contingent observation. What is D? Read all of your answer choices. Timeout ribbon procedure. The person is not given any sort of marker, ribbon, bracelet, sticker, okay, indicating they're in timeout. They're simply removed from the game and forced to observe contingent on flashing the wrong signal. So this timeout procedure would be considered contingent observation. You hanging out with friends 10 nights in a row as a result of not hanging out with friends for months due to the pandemic is considered a what? So at first, when you were locked down, right, and you were in quarantine and you couldn't hang out with your friends, okay, you were what? You were deprived of that social time with friends. Once you were allowed back out, okay, what happened? Well, you hung out with them 10 nights in a row, okay? So motivating operations have two effects. They have value altering effects and they have behavior altering effects. Value altering, they can either increase or decrease the value of a consequence, and they can alter your behavior. They can evoke behavior, they can make you do it more, or they can abate behavior. In this case, we're talking about the actual behavior, right? Your behavior of hanging out with friends was severely altered, okay, due to the deprivation. So you hanging out with 10 friends in a row, right, is considered a what? Well, it was a behavior altering effect, right? You hung out with your friends 10 nights in a row after not hanging out with them at all, okay? We're specifically talking about the difference in your behavior in this question, okay? So be very careful, be very specific. Function altering, okay? You're still obtaining this socially mediated reinforcement, okay? The function didn't necessarily change in this case. And then it's not an abolishing operation, all right? Because it altered your behavior. It evoked your behavior of hanging out with your friends 10 nights in a row. 157, a type 2 error is also known as a what? So this is something you just want to know what a type 1 and a type 2 error is. Type 1 error is going to be a false positive. A type 2 error is going to be a false negative. Okay, it's just something you want to know and understand. There's no secret to it, right? It's just something you want to memorize. Okay, some questions are just like that, right? You just need to know your terms, your definitions like the back of your hand. So if you get into the situation, you immediately know a type 2 error is considered a false negative. 158, the three-dimensional quantities used in ABA are repeatability, temporal extent, and temporal locus. Which of the following is not included in repeatability? So repeatability is, of course, the response or behavior happening over and over again. If we're going to measure something, we want it to be repeatable. If something happens once, it's not going to do us much good to design a measurement system if it's not going to happen again. So what is included in repeatability? Okay, well, repeatability does involve acceleration. Acceleration is frequency of change over time, okay? So we're looking at some sort of frequency, behavior, and repeatability, right? Rate, again, rate is part of repeatability because repeatability has to do with frequency, and rate is what? Rate is just simply frequency over time. And then count, of course, is frequency, right? So acceleration, rate, and count all have to do with frequency. Therefore, they all have to do with repeatability. Remember, these three categories, okay, are the quote unquote umbrella terms for our continuous measurements, right? Temporal extent has to do with duration. Temporal locus has to do with IRT and latency. Repeatability has to do with things like frequency, rate, count, and of course, acceleration. So which of the following is not included in repeatability? That would be IRT. So again, temporal extent, we're looking at things like duration. Temporal locus, okay, we're looking at IRT and latency. Repeatability, we're looking at things like frequency, rate, and count. 159, Greg wants to reduce the amount of coffee he drinks each day. He starts taking frequency data on the number of cups of coffee he drinks. On Monday, he drank 4 cups. On Tuesday, he drank 3 cups. On Wednesday, he drank 3 cups. And on Thursday, he drank 4 cups. How many cups per day did Greg drink on average? As a BCBA, you're going to be, if you don't, let's just say if you don't have a system that does it for you, you might have to manually calculate averages, okay? Averages are very straightforward. It's very simple math. On the exam, they give you calculators, they give you pencils and papers. So if you're giving an average question, the most important thing to do is make sure you understand what the question is looking for, okay? What type of average is the question wanting you to find out? In this case, the question wants the average frequency. They give you all the data, right? We have 4, 3, 3, and 4. So how are we going to find an average? We're simply going to average or add up all of our frequency counts to get a total. So 4 plus 3 is 7. 7 plus 3 is 10. 10 plus 4 is 14. Our total frequency is 14. Of course, to find an average, you take your total and you divide it by the number of data points, which we have 4. So you're going to divide 14 divided by 4, and you're going to get 3.5. That way of finding the average works for any type of data. So they can ask you to find the average duration, the average latency, the average IRT, whatever they ask you, you're simply just finding a simple average calculation. Now, if you're unclear on that, if you hate math, like most of us do, okay, work on it a few times, right? But don't overcomplicate it. All you're doing is finding an average. And if they're going to ask you that, they're going to give you enough data to answer the question. It's a very important thing to remember. They're always going to give you enough information in the question to answer the question, okay? Don't try adding your own personal experiences, your personal knowledge. Just use what the question gives you to answer the question they ask. And then 160, Ben works with a 16-year-old client who communicates at a typical level when compared to peers his age. However, when Ben takes his client out on community-based interventions, Ben insists on ordering food for his client and communicating with community helpers for his client. Based on the given information, Ben is failing to do what? So, no matter what population you work with, no matter what their needs are, what their disabilities are, what their deficits are, we always want to treat them, okay, like we would treat anybody else, right? We don't want to baby them, okay? We don't want to be condescending. And in this case, Ben has a 16-year-old client who communicates at a level compared to peers his age. If you take a typical 16-year-old and you bring them on a community-based interventions, they should be able to communicate with community helpers on their own, okay? 16-year-old is plenty old enough to do that, okay? In this case, Ben is taking it upon himself to not allow that. He's treating the 16-year-old like a child, essentially. And if he's doing that, what is he failing to do? Well, he's failing to maintain client dignity. Client dignity is all about respect, treating them at an appropriate skill level, at an appropriate age level. Ben is not doing that. This 16-year-old who can communicate at a level compared to other peers his age should be communicating for himself. And if not, Ben should be working on it, okay? So Ben is failing to maintain client dignity. Let's see if we can find a better answer. B, avoid dual relationships. No, we're assuming this is a community-based intervention, which is assuming Ben is taking him out in a professional capacity, which is perfectly acceptable. C, abide by legal and regulatory requirements. Ben is not breaking any laws here. It's totally okay as long as he had permission. And then D, avoiding conflicts of interest. Again, this is a community-based intervention. This is some sort of intervention Ben is implementing, we can assume as part of his work. Ben is ultimately failing to maintain client dignity by not treating his client at an age and skill appropriate level. All right, I hope you enjoyed. Please check out all of our study materials if you did, bcbastudy.com. Like I said, our second practice exam is coming next week. So if you buy the practice exam and the combo pack now, you'll get that one at no extra charge. Also check out our 5th edition task list study guide. Any questions or comments, please let me know. I'm happy to help. Other than that, keep working hard, keep studying hard. I'll see you soon.